Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the first episode of a new podcast on DNO titled Factually Speaking. Factually Speaking actually speaks for itself. That's the title of the program. In the sense that it will be focusing on the facts as we discuss various matters, of interest to you as individuals and to the country in general. We will take time to research and to present you with statistical information on the matters that are being discussed, bring you the facts and figures, so that you may go away from this program with an understanding of the matter at hand based on the facts presented. My co-host for this program is McCarthy, and of course, he's going to be a source of information as well as a regular host or co-host of the program. Mark? Welcome
Yes,
to
thank you.
Factually Speaking.
Thank you, Tim, and glad to be here to share some facts with our co-citizens, whether they live in Dominica or they live abroad in the diaspora. Yeah, and as you said there, we hope to do facts on matters that are pertinent to Dominica.
There are a plethora of topics out there
To start,
that we
right.
could have, decided to tackle in our first program. But why the crime rate in Dominica?
Well, the reason we agreed to do the first episode on crime in Dominica is because generally we have this idea in Dominica that Dominica is an extraordinarily safe place, almost a Garden of Eden, you might say. But the facts belie that assumption. And that's why we want to start with the crime situation in Dominica, because crime affects every citizen and every non-citizen, even the visitors to our island are affected by crime. And if we know what the crime situation is, then we are much better able to manage the situation.
What are the facts,
Okay.
as far as the research that you've done regarding the crime situation in this country?
Well, there are many crimes that our citizens can perpetrate in any country. But the one that is indicative of, you might say, failure in the society the most is the level of violence that is taking place within the country. When there is no uprising or civil war, and it's just interpersonal violence, which usually we refer to as murder. So the murder rate is one of those metrics that gives us a good idea as to the level of violence and insecurity that is in the country. And just to give you a starting point, the average murder rate per 100,000 population in the world is about 6. It varies from year to year, but spins around 6. The United States, for example, which we think of as relatively violent, actually its rate of murder is about 6 murders per 100,000 persons, which translates roughly to about 25,000 murders per year. The population is 330 million. Dominica's population, of course, is nowhere at that level, but we also have a high murder rate that is actually much higher generally each year than the United States. And the figures we have here are from 1999 to 2021. And if we start off with murder, as we said there, we'll see that in 1999, we had 6 murders. And that gave us a rate of 8.35 murders per 100,000 persons. Obviously, it relates to the population and the number of murders. In 2000, which is the beginning of the century, there were 2. And the murder rate there was 2.40 per 100,000. Following year, which is 2001, we had only 1, which is great news, but could have been better news if the number had been 0. But there was 1. And the murder rate there was 1.41. So in these 2 years, 2000 and 2001, our murder rate in Dominica was below the world average by a significant amount. Whereas in 1999, it was above the world average by a relatively small amount as well. It was above. And then we get into 2002, and we have 9 murders. And our murder rate then jumps up to 12.79 per 100,000 people. And the most, I'd say, murderous year was in 2017, when we had 19 murders, which gave us a murder rate of 27.23, which is quite high according to the world standard, which is about 6. We have 27.23 in 2017. Yeah. And in 2020, it dropped by 4 murders. So in 2020, we had 20.72 murders per 100,000 people. Yeah. So our murder rate is actually much higher than we generally think.
Your analysis, though, of the figures, I mean, is it based, we have established that they fluctuated, between 1999 and 2021. It was not a steady trend, so to speak.
Right.
But given all of the figures, as a statistician, as an economist, somebody who does statistics, I mean, if you were to analyze those figures, what would be your ultimate assessment?
I would
think you say that is indicative of a rising trend, or how would you characterize it?
A rising trend, because at the turn of the century, we were at 6 per 100,000. At the 2000 itself exactly, we were at 2.8 per 100,000. And then in 2001, we were at 1 murder for the year, which gave us a murder rate of 1.41 per 100,000 persons. And then from then on, it started increasing. Okay? And it got to as high as 19 murders in 2017. So I would say, although it's fluctuating, the general trend has been upward. In 2021, it was at 9, and I think that's partly to do with the pandemic, because in 2021, the pandemic was in, you might say, full swing, and we were ordered to stay home and not to be out in public, etc. So there were probably less opportunities for people to get into conflict with each other and engage in violence. Yeah.
Okay.
Leading to murder.
All right. So there's been a trend, in terms of the increase in the murder rate.
Yeah. At the same time, however, maybe you shouldn't mention this there. Next, I might say grave crime or violence.
Well, I was coming to that. I want to ask you what other crimes, violent crimes of note, that you were able to get information on.
Manslaughter, the crime of manslaughter actually has been quite low in Dominica, meaning to say that the police and the prosecutorial arm of the justice system did not prosecute many people for manslaughter. Yeah, and many years there were 0 manslaughter charges.
For those people who are not sure, not everyone is familiar with court terms and so on, and the laws. What is manslaughter opposed to murder? Yeah.
Well, manslaughter implies that you were reckless in causing somebody's death, but it was not your intention to cause the death. For example, you might have been driving at 60 miles per hour on a piece of road where it's really only safe to drive at 30. You were not intended to kill anybody, but at the reckless speed at which you were driving, you got into an accident with somebody else and you caused his death. So you didn't have a guilty mind, but you...
There was no intent to outright go out and kill that person.
You were negligent, you might say, very negligent.
And also too, we might want to know that a number of cases begin as murder charges, right? And reduced to manslaughter in the process. Huh?
In the process of the prosecution and the trial, etc.
Right.
Some people might have been charged with murder and they were found guilty of manslaughter, or they might not have been found not guilty at all of murder because it might have been considered justified homicide.
Yeah.
Like defense of yourself or defense of somebody else.
Okay, so I interrupted you, but I hope you can begin where we stuck in. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. But there is a number of crimes of violence there that I think we should highlight. And these are crimes that are generally executed against the female population. There are a number of categories there: rape, indecent assault, unlawful sexual intercourse. Yeah, these are the three. Yes?
And what figures do you have?
Okay.
Please.
And we will notice there that in each year, in the period from 1999 to 2001, there were, for rape, they were all in the double digits, except 1 year when there were 6, which is 2018. There were 6 rapes reported to the police. Oh, and there's another year when there were 9, just 1 below the double digit. Yeah, but so it's relatively high for the female population.
Right,
So generally the people who are suffer rape.
I can see that the year 2000 was the highest. That was 24.
Yeah.
24, rape cases.
25.
Well, it was 2008 then.
Right.
25.
25. Yeah.
Okay.
And we should note with these cases there very importantly. Whereas for murder, for example, we can pretty much say these are the number of murders that took place. But with rape, we have to say these are the number of that came to the attention of the police. Because there might have been more that were not reported. Yes.
Okay.
So what the figures we have there are those that are reported to the police. And then we also have indecent assault, which is even higher than rape. Yes.
Okay, let's quote some of the figures.
And we had as many as 43, not 43, sorry, 52. Yes. Cases of indecent assault in 1 year. Right? Yeah. And if you add them abroad, they come to quite a fair number of crimes of violence against female population. If you add unlawful sexual intercourse, and I think in this section there on unlawful sexual intercourse, this is a section in which the child abuse, sexual abuse would be listed. Unlawful sexual intercourse. Most of them would be listed in this category, and we notice that we have as many as 27, 42, 35, 43, 65, etc. in 1 year.
And the highest being 65.
Right.
So
it's not a crime of minor significance. It's a major occurrence in the society, which we have to try to tackle. To get rid of it.
Okay, so we'll come into that. We certainly want to look at a certain point in this program as to how we can provide what we need to be mindful of and what we need to do as a society. But before that, I think it's all appropriate, Matt, to talk about what causes crime, from your own, experience, your own research.
Well,
what information have you come across to suggest the reasons, why people commit crime?
The different crimes have different reasons.
Right.
For example, the crime of unlawful sexual intercourse, so far as it pertains to minors, people less than 12. There is evidence in the literature that the people who do that are suffering from what is known as a paraphilia, which is a big term, medical term, People who have all the sexual desire. And one of those, what they call as pedophiles, which is say people, and especially whose sexual attraction is directed only towards children below 12 years old. These persons are pedophiles. They are born like this. So the punishment does not diminish the desire to have sex with children.
It's a disease, right? It's a sort of illness, mental illness, right?
Yeah. But
it's a mental condition, right?
I would more say it's a brain defect. There's a bit of difference.
Right.
Although you say your mind is in your brain,
Right.
but there is a bit of difference there.
That's the medical definition of the thing. A brain defect.
Yes. It's more brain defect. So similar to psychopathy,
Right.
A person is a psychopath, he's born a psychopath.
Right.
And he does what he does because he's a psychopath. In a similar vein, the person who is a pedophile does what he does because he's born a pedophile.
So essentially, there's no cure for that.
No, a person who is properly defined as a pedophile, there is no cure except something which people sometimes say in anger on Facebook or
Castrate.
Right. Which is say castration.
Right.
Yes. And some persons in some countries actually opt to be castrated either chemically or surgically in order to rid themselves of the affliction. Because it's not the persons who are pedophiles, very pedophiles, are not unaware that what they're doing is not socially acceptable. They are in a sense similar to an alcoholic. Knows he shouldn't be drunk at 9 o'clock in the morning when he should be at work somewhere. No, he knows that. But you passing in front of the shop and see some people they having a drink, joins in, and his intention is to have one, and he's there all till afternoon, So it's in the same category. And in this case, the only sure way to do that is to pretty much eliminate sexual desire in the person.
Oh, okay, Mark, you've just touched on crimes committed by pedophiles, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that is just one of many different types of sexual offense, right?
Right.
Committed by people particularly against women. It happens against males as well. But it's more common, I think, against females.
Males against females.
Females, So that's one, the pedophile, right? But there are other types of assault. Indecent assault is one of them, other sexual offenses.
Right.
Rape.
Indecent assault, you might say. Another way to describe that would be attempted rape.
Okay. Right. Attempted rape. It's one of the ways you can characterize that. Yes. But rape itself, prison, that's pretty frequent as well.
Right.
So you mentioned, the brain, what you refer to as the brain defects, in the pedophiles. But in other cases such as rape, indecent assault, what some of the triggers?
In terms of rape, the literature suggests that the major trigger is a question of power. It's a power relationship where I will overpower you and have my way with you according to what I want. So it's although it's sexual, the real drive behind it is desire to have power over other persons. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is basically the main, or essentially the main cause, or the main trigger, for people who commit rape. Okay. There's also, I guess the same thing applies to indecent assault.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It's a man who decides, because he also has greater strength, that he should have his way with the female person whether the female person consents or not. And it is, yeah.
All right. So we were about to tackle
Some other major
the
crimes,
issues of major crimes,
types of the crime,
right? Like murder and robbery and
robbery,
assault.
burglary,
Okay.
property, basically crimes against property. Yeah. So we had in at the beginning of the period there, burglary, which is defined as entering any building, whether the door is locked or open, and taking things from there. Before we had the burglary laws, which I think came on the books somewhere in the 1990s, memory serves me well. We broke down that kind of crime into two categories. There was breaking and entering, and then there was simply larceny, which meant that if the door was open and you went in and you took something and you went out, it was considered somehow or less a crime than if you actually forced the door or window open in entering, in which case you'll be charged for breaking and entering. They dispense with the distinction between two kinds of theft, if you like, from buildings and similar enclosures. So since you enter a place and take something, you are committing a burglary. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Okay. But what sort of figures you have for
burglary?
Yeah.
For burglaries,
I guess the question here is we've spoken about murder, we've
for
spoken about
burglaries at the beginning of the century, you see 1999, we had 1,320 burglaries. Okay. And the year in which we had the most burglaries was, we had 1,551. That was 2002. There were 1,551 burglaries. And then there was a steady drop in burglaries reported to the police, down to the point where in 2021, there were only 409 burglaries reported to the police. Yeah, so it came from almost 1,000 less in 2021 than in 2022. Yeah, almost 1,000 less. So, which brings us to the question of why did burglaries drop continuously until it got to as low as 409? Well, I would think for the 409, which is in the year 2021, the fact that we were on the max state of emergency because of the pandemic and our movements were restricted. The burglars' movements were also restricted, so they were less able to engage in burglary. Yeah, but although we noticed that it has been dropping steady.
Yeah, that's the question.
Which could be two things. One, the persons who have premises secure their premises better, so that it's more difficult for the burglar to get access, or burglars have found it not too profitable, you might say, to engage in burglary, as well as the people who suffer burglary might consider that although they've lost something, they might consider that the court process, for example, would involve another expenditure of time and money on their part, which and therefore the attitude of not reporting the burglaries, even if they did happen. So there might have been not so much a drop in the number of burglaries, but a drop in the number of reports about burglaries happening.
Okay, so in essence, Mark, from what you've been saying, we should only be concerned about certain crimes at this point. Because some of them, like burglaries, for example, are decreasing so that they no longer pose the kind of threat or threat to security and stability
that
they did some years ago, right?
The year 2000.
Yeah. Right. So it means at this stage, we as a country, we should be concerned based on the statistics about certain crimes, murder being one of them, sexual offenses against women, crimes of violence, right, against being another set. So no, but we haven't talked about. We talked about murder in terms of the statistics, but we haven't talked about what it is that would cause people to commit murders, right, or to commit murder.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of things that could be driving that. There is this document here that talks about crime and violence in the Americas, which, by the way, Western Hemisphere, which is say from the United States, Canada, Mexico, down to Argentina, is the most murderous part of the world. Yeah. For example, they say here from this Insight on Crime, February 2023, that more than 40 of the most dangerous cities in the world are located in this region, Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as 2 of the 20 countries with the least peace in the world, according to the Global Peace Index. Despite government's large spending on security and high imprisonment rates, drug and weapon trafficking, organized crime, and gangs have turned violence into an epidemic that affects the whole region. Solution to this issue seems to be hardly attainable, which is to say that crime and violence, not just crime and violence, but violence is associated very much with the traffic in arms and guns among, I'd say, underworld figures, as well as the traffic in illegal substances, drugs, to be straightforward about it. But the people who engage in this activity, which is, from all appearances, highly profitable, go to any lengths to protect their market. And if it means dispatching somebody to the other side of the river, they do that. So which indicates that there is, if you like, a lot of the crimes that are taking place are crimes that are connected with acquiring economic goods and or services, which probably is tied in to the fact that the societies in Latin America and the Caribbean, including Dominica, our societies are pretty fractured. We don't have a holistic society. There are many levels of, let's say, disagreement among groups of people in the society. For example, pretty much all Africans who are in the Caribbean here brought here as slaves. And now that slavery has ended, a lot of the people of African descent are still pretty close to the bottom of the economic and social ladder. Then the indigenous people who were here, they're in a similar situation. So that there are fissures in the society which lead to people feeling excluded from the benefits of the social order, and therefore they engage in these activities even knowing that it's illegal and it's dangerous and they could get killed. They will be willing to do it. Yeah. So I think the different kinds of crime have different reasons, and there is a number which is called a Gini coefficient, which is to say it's a number that calculates how unevenly or evenly the income and wealth in a society is distributed. And I think in our part of the world, the Gini coefficient is pretty high, meaning that the distribution of income is very uneven. So there are large groups of people who have very low incomes and who find it difficult to get jobs in the formal economy, and therefore they turn to alternative means of getting sustenance. Yeah, that's where crime, drugs, and guns come in, because the guns are needed and necessary to facilitate the smuggling and the retention of your property. That's how the drug dealers look at it, to make sure that they have their product for sale in the market, and they will be willing to, take the necessary steps as they see it to protect their financial interests.
But not is this always the case then, particularly in the case of drug trafficking, sale of drugs and so on, that people involved are doing that because they're right, they're underprivileged, they're poor. I mean, and the cases in which people get into that with the intention of actually
making money,
and
yes,
it's not because they're poor necessarily or they can't survive.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
But there's a lot of greed involved in that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. In other words, some people feel that they can't make money in the, lack of a better word, the formal society or this formal economy. Therefore, it is an alternative. And part of the reason, because our societies, in point of fact, are fractured. They're fractured along racial lines, ethnic lines, and finally, class lines. Yeah, and if the large class of persons are considering that they are slipping back into, in terms of material goods and so on, then they make every effort, including illegal efforts, to rectify what they consider injustice by the society. Yeah.
So essentially, in dealing with matters of crime of that nature, I mean, those are the things that we need to take into consideration to arrive at a final.
Because as the statement I read out there just says there, we have a very high imprisonment rate, including Dominica, by the way. But that has done nothing to diminish violent crime. It just keeps going. But if you had a high imprisonment rate and imprisonment was a viable solution, then you should be having violent crime going down rather than going up.
Yeah, but I mean, a different approach, say, perhaps through rehabilitation, right, in prison, is not necessarily going to solve societal issues. Okay? In other words, you will still have, the divide in society where the fissures that you spoke about, like where some people are just not as advantaged or more or less or disadvantaged, so to speak, than others.
Right.
And this causes this, this divide and the need by those people who are in that disadvantaged position to find ways of surviving or earning, income. Right. So therefore, the battle interface to me has to be fought into fronts, right? Mm-hmm. One where you try to ensure that the people who commit crimes can be rehabilitated in such a manner that they can go back into society as better people. Right. But on the other hand, if they go back into society as, better people, they are, and they meet the same conditions, that cause them to get into crime in the first place, nothing is going to change, right?
Yeah, for them not to get back into it.
Right. So then how do we tackle that?
Well, we have to put resources in the right place. In other words, instead of building more prisons and hiring more guards and so on there, we might better use some of that money there to have interventions with particularly the youth that are at risk before they get involved with the legal and judicial system. So they have an alternative and they see a different path that's available to them. So, but which means it's not a thing that we're going to solve in a 5-year election cycle. Yes, so the state has to commit to that kind of intervention over a long period of time. Yeah.
Until France,
yes. Rather than say, because here's what happens. It's pretty easy when the citizenry are concerned and they're expressing concerns that crimes are happening, they can't get out of their house, they have to stay home, they have at 26 o'clock, they have to be indoor, etc. Like, I'll tell you a joke. One day I went to Trinidad and, I went to this person's home and they have the usual burglar bars all over the doors and they have a TV set that has its own burglar bar. So you have to watch TV through the burglar bars.
In other words, the person that's a burglar could come into the house and probably burgle other things, right? Take other things when you're taking the TV, right?
No,
your TV is probably the most valuable item in the house or in that part of the house.
The person who had the house thought that is an item that a burglar
would probably want to
take. So, and he's not going to let him have it easily. Yeah. So he built his own burglar bag for the TV. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So rehabilitation, and measures to address societal disparities, right, or economic disparities and so on.
Yeah.
But you're not saying that the prevention, okay, the punishment for crime, is something to be done away with. You're not saying that, right?
No.
Right.
You can't do away with it.
Right.
But you have to be aware, well, sometimes it's a kind of economics you have to do, to say what is more costly. Put the person in prison and treat him as badly as you can while he's in prison, or put the person in prison and treat him as humanely as you can with the intention that when he goes back out, he does not get back in the same life that landed him in prison in the first place. It's easy. If you're a lawmaker, to promise the citizenry, we will increase the punishment on XYZ crime by 100%. Okay? It's easy. You go to the parliament and you pass the law and it's now the law. But that does nothing. I remember in Trinidad, Mr. Ramesh, who was the Attorney General, he had 8 members of the Dole Shady gang executed on one day. And the murders in Trinidad didn't stop for a minute. They finished at all. But there is a certain mighty satisfaction on the part of the citizenry that the government has done something, but the thing that they've done did not diminish the criminal activity.
So you're saying there's no merit to the argument or the case being put forward by people who are advocating for the return of capital punishment?
No, because obviously capital punishment act does not prevent people from committing murder.
Okay. All right. So we continue to punish, but that shouldn't be the only
end all of it. And we should be putting more and more resources into what you might call soft activities to prevent persons from getting into a life of crime.
So that's a question I was going to ask you. I mean, it would entail spending a lot more resources, putting a lot more resources into that activity.
Well, shifting resources, right? It's shifting resources.
No, but you continue to punish. I mean, you may not punish all, but you still continue to have a punitive aspect to, to dealing with crime.
There can be punitive aspects. But then you, for example, a young person gets involved in some illegal activity. Well, is it necessary to put him in prison Or do you ask him to join a community program and do 1,000 hours of community work in the community? Instead of going to prison, you have in fact sanctioned him, but you didn't put him in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in addition to doing the community work, you're also, whatever it is that drives and that drove him to commit the crime, you also want to tackle that, while he's in prison.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to be spending more money towards that as
yes, but you also have to remember, that he has children, and you don't want his children to join like the family business. So that's where I'm saying you have to commit resources. You have to commit for a long period of time, not for a 5-year program and afterwards it comes to them. That's a continuous part of the social activities that happen in the society.
Yeah, but do you think though, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're proposing, but I'm just looking at the, practical, aspects of that, how practical it is.
But everything is practical if we want to do it.
Well, okay. Well, how feasible then it is given our economic circumstances?
We have to change our mentality.
No, economic circumstances. The mentality, I agree with you.
Right.
But the economic circumstances where lots of governments are struggling to meet, their everyday, including ours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Expenses, right?
Right.
I mean, things could vary from time to time, in other words, it's not a constant, right? But there are times when, like now, where we're struggling, as a country to meet our expenses, the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our recurrent expenditure, right? To get enough money for that. That we have to be allocating resources towards what you're proposing. And this is not to say that what you're proposing doesn't have merit.
Yeah.
But the question is, in making those decisions and prioritizing, what don't you think that could be a challenge? It could be very challenging for any government.
Everything is a challenge. Right. Every single thing is a challenge.
How do you think the government, would be able to, or any government in countries like ours, to be able to undertake something like that effectively?
Well, things are always difficult. There's never enough money to do everything we want to do. We have to make a choice. Part of the choice we have to make is we have to weigh the future and the present. If we invest in the youth before he gets to the stage of being within the ambit of the justice system, we can prevent in maybe 10, 15 years these people, or some of them, from joining into the criminal activity as their way of livelihood and their modus operandi, their lifestyle. But what we must not do is have the short-termism. We must commit to a change. It's like an oil tanker on the sea. It's a big ship. When you've decided to turn the wheel, the ship doesn't turn immediately. It takes a good while after you've turned the wheel for the whole ship to spin around and turn in another direction. And you have to be committed and wait until the ship has turned. If you want to turn, it's not a speedboat. You want to do that, get a speedboat. Problem with the speedboat is that it can capsize pretty easy and kill you. Yeah. So if you're taking the speedboat approach, that problem is where we are. But what did happen now? Right. You don't put enough resources and leave the resources there for long enough time to bear fruit.
But given our political system, right, and the fact that the very thing that you're advocating against is the very thing that has governed the way we behave, right, in terms of what we prioritize, right?
Yeah.
First past the post 5-year system. This Westminster 5-year system, right? Where once we get in there, our priorities are to how can we ensure that we get re-elected in the next 5 years. So it seems to me that I think you pointed out sometime earlier on that We need to change our mindset, right, as a country. We need to change the way we do things, right? And not just with what you're proposing, but the way that we approach everything else, because that is how our political system is structured. And that is how our politicians operate. That we want to ensure when we get there, we do the things that will ensure that we get re-elected.
The point I'm making there is that these structures and ways of thinking, people created them and they do them. And they can do otherwise and make a better choice. Because, for example, we were talking about sexual offenses there. Not so long ago, there were an outcry about the number of sexual offenses, particularly offenses against female children. And the government goes to the parliament and they passed what I would consider a very strict and stiff law supposedly to deter sexual offenses. But obviously, as we can see from these figures there and so on there, that has pretty much done nothing. But so what is the government next move? To increase the penalty or do something else? Because just the penalty is not creating the kind of society we need. And I've got to come back to the numbers here from this figure here, that we have very high imprisonment rate. The only other thing you would say that goes beyond imprisonment is simply to capital punishment for practically all crimes. That's not a feasible thing.
Okay, I'm with you, Matt, on that, but I just realized that you're advocating a massive shift.
Yeah.
Right?
And you have to start.
In the way that we think, in our mindset, in the way we do things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's something we probably need to apply to almost every aspect of our governance and our way of life in this country, not just the crimes, Okay. Well, Matt, I mean, I think we've practically covered, most of the things that we set out to do.
But I think I would just want to bring back to the attention of our viewers and listeners is that our region of the world is the most violent region of the world. And Jamaica, for a number of years now, has been the country in the world with the highest murder rate. 2021, I put up this slide here. 5 countries in the Caribbean maybe to say the English-speaking Caribbean, that the highest murder rates were Jamaica, followed by St. Lucia, followed by Belize, and Dominica is in 4th place, and Guyana is in 5th place. Just a little bit of Dominica. In terms of murders, 200,000 people. So we should understand that and take appropriate measures on the advice of professionals in this business, which I am not, as to what we in Dominica can do to diminish the number of murders we are having, so that it drops back to the level we had in 2000, which was I think 2, and then the next year there was only 1. Yeah, rather than having 19 and rising.
Okay, so in the Caribbean, Dominica is 5th.
English-speaking
Caribbean. Yeah. What about other places in the world? Internationally? Where do we fit?
This is in 2021. In 2022, there's another statistic here. 2022, Jamaica again is at the top of the list with 52.90 murders per 100,000 population, followed by Venezuela at 40.40. Trinidad and Tobago is in third place at 39.40, only 1 point lower than Venezuela. Dominica does not figure on this 2022 list.
Yeah, you're talking about the Caribbean there still? No? Or
No,
is it Latin America?
Latin America,
Okay.
and the Caribbean.
And the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The country with the lowest murder rate was Chile with 4.60, which is below the world average. Yeah. But there's something maybe that's been puzzling me for a bit there. Maybe some of our viewers might be able to enlighten me or enlighten us on it there. That the United States, we think of it as a violent country, but as we just indicated there, it has a murder rate about 6 per 100,000, which is lower than we have most years. But at the same time, the United States has a self-murder rate or suicide rate, that is sometimes called, about 3 times as high as the murder rate, which I find very puzzling. And if there's somebody from the United States who wants to live there or whatever, we would be very happy to know from you what could be the cause of this odd behavior that so many people are resorting to suicide.
How does the rate in the United States compare to the rest of the world, other parts of the world?
But I know I didn't look at the suicide rate for the rest of the world, no. But you can look it up. You can find it on the internet.
Because that would give us some context then.
Yeah.
Whether it is a widespread thing,
right,
or whether it is specific to the United States.
I doubt many countries where the number of suicides exceed the number of murders. Yeah. But there might be. Yeah.
All right. Well, Matt, I think we've come to the end of the line for this one.
Okay.
Thank you for providing the information. As I told you at the beginning of this program, viewers, that Mac is a co-host, but from time to time, he will be the main contributor in terms of information to the topic at hand. Tonight, that's how we started off his role as a resource person. As we progress with this program, we aim to bring resource people whenever necessary when we're discussing topics where we feel that there are people who are in a position to contribute meaningfully, significantly to the discussion. We will bring them on board, and we also encourage you to give us feedback and to indicate some of the topics that you would like us to tackle on your behalf. But always remember that the focus of this show is to bring you the facts and figures. So we will be tackling topics that will enable us to do the necessary research and bring you the appropriate statistics. So remember that when you're making suggestions to us. Matt, final one.
And I just think probably we should have another session on this topic of violence and crime in Dominica. And this time have somebody else who has a different perspective from us as a guest. I have somebody in mind. I will confirm that later as soon as we made the arrangements for the person to be with us. Yeah.
Okay, so we may have someone else on this, I'm sure, talking about the crime rate and crime generally in Dominica. And we're looking forward to being able to bring that to you. But in the meantime, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.